Hi everyone, welcome back to MEG Motors. Today we're going to be working on another Stihl. This is a Stihl fs91r 4-stroke line trimmer. This one actually runs, it'll start, but it won't take any throttle. So we're probably going to have to pull the carburetor, but I'll show you what it's doing. We're going to start it up right quick and I'll show you what it's doing and we'll see if we can fix it. See if it needs, I don't know if it needs choke at this point or not. So there you can hear it. It'll start and it'll idle. As soon as I get it out, it'll idle. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what's going on with it. Sounds like carburetor troubles to me, so we're going to pull the carburetor and open it up, see what's going on in there, and go from there. So I'll reset the camera, we'll get that carburetor off, and we'll see what's going on in there. Alright, so let's get the carburetor off of this one. Cool thing about Stihl is almost everything on their equipment is 27 torques. I have a tool, this is a tool that comes with some some Stihl equipment, and it has a 27 torques on the end of it, and so I use this tool a lot when I'm working on Stihl anyway. Alright, I'm going to need an 8mm for that. This one was very, very dirty when I got it, so I spent some time washing it. If you see water on it, because I spent a lot of time washing it. It's completely covered with an oily residue. I'm not sure why it has so much oil on it. I have a suspicion it was probably running rich for a long time and sprayed a bunch of junk out of the exhaust. The interesting thing about Stihl, even though this is a 4-stroke, you still have to run premix in it. I think they call it 4-mix. A lot of the 4-stroke equipment from other manufacturers actually has oil in the crankcase like a traditional 4-stroke engine would have, but still elected to do theirs a little differently. And so you still have to run premix, and so oil can come out of the exhaust on these. And like I said, this stuff right here was all over this one, so I have a feeling it's been probably running rich for a while. Alright, I'm going to take this cover off here. I think that's the primer bulb goes up through this cover, so it'll probably be easier to deal with everything to get this if we just get this cover off. Alright, so here's our carburetor. Let's see if we can get it to pull off of there. All right, we've got a fuel line right here. It looks like another fuel line right here. Alright, 2 fuel lines off. To disconnect the throttle, looks like we have to just open the throttle and it comes out through a slot. although it's kind of fighting us. I'm not sure exactly what it takes to get that off. Let's see if we can disconnect the cable. I don't know if that'll help. Looked like that was going to be an easy throttle to disconnect, but it sure is fighting me. There we go. Alright, so here's our carburetor. This is a Stihl. I think they use, and sometimes they use their own carburetor, sometimes they use a Walbro. This one says Stihl on it right there. I'm going to go clean this up a little bit, and then we're going to open it up and see what's going on inside. Alright, so here's our carburetor. I don't see any other brand names on it, so this may be a Stihl proprietary. We're going to open it up and see if we can see what's going on. Oh, I see a C1Q in there, which is a Zama part number. Alright, so this is a standard diaphragm style carburetor. So we got a diaphragm under here. I think that's going to be it's going to be the fuel pump, I think. I'm going to open this side. This actually looks a little different. Let me open this side. This is the fitting that goes to the crankcase. I think. Let's see what's under this cover. Oh, yep, that's a fuel pump. So here's the fuel pump. Oh, wow. And so, yeah, what we want to see here is these two flaps right here have to be there, and they have to be intact and not torn or ripped or missing, and they seem to be okay. And then this is yeah, this is the fuel pump. And so on a 2-cycle engine, this fuel pump diaphragm right here is moved back and forth by pulses from the crankcase, because a 2-cycle engine will have alternating positive and negative pressure in the crankcase to make the engine run, and they can harness that in the carburetor to move this fuel pump diaphragm back and forth. On a 4-stroke engine, the crankcase is vented to the atmosphere, so we don't get that positive and negative pressure. And so there's a spring on the fuel pump, and so the engine will pull the diaphragm in one direction and the spring will push it back. And so we need this diaphragm to be solid, not torn, in good shape, and still flexible, and it feels pretty good. This is a rubber membrane, and that part of the membrane feels okay. So I think our fuel pump is probably working okay. And so yeah, fuel will get pulled up out of this fitting here, and we'll end up at this screen right here, which should be a passage over to the metering chamber. So we're going to take this side apart over here and see what's going on under here. This should be our metering chamber. Alright, there's our metering diaphragm. Let's pull that off of there if we can. All right, here's our metering diaphragm, and it needs to be kind of the same thing. It needs to be soft and flexible and not torn, and it looks fine. Here's our metering chamber. And everything kind of looks okay in here. I'm gonna see if I can get this gasket off of here. We'll need to get that off to measure the metering lever and make sure that it's adjusted correctly. That diaphragm just ripped. I mean, this gasket just ripped. So we're most likely going to have to buy a kit for this carburetor. We can find something wrong in here. Everything looks pretty clean in here, and it had fuel in the chamber, which is a good sign. I'm not 100% sure what's wrong with this one yet. All right, I'm gonna get a screwdriver to take this needle out. So there's a tiny orifice right here, I believe, that provides the majority of the fuel when you open the throttle. I'm suspecting that may be plugged up. It's hard to tell just looking at it. I'm going to try to spray a little carburetor cleaner through there. I didn't see anything come out. Give me just a sec. Let me get a wire and we're going to try to clean that orifice. There's a little bit of stuff going through it now. I'm not sure I've cleaned it all the way, but I don't have anything smaller than this. I have a feeling that orifice may be a little bit smaller than this wire. Oh, there we go. Felt like it went through that time. Yeah, there's definitely so before, when I was spraying through that orifice, nothing was coming out inside the venturi of the carburetor, but now when I spray it, a lot comes out. So I'm hoping that that may have been the root cause of the problems with this one. Very good. Yeah, I'm gonna have to order. I'm gonna order a kit for this carburetor though, because I've torn up this gasket. I think all the parts are okay. I think that jet was plugged up. I think that's probably the root cause of the problem. But we'll order a kit. We'll put it back together, and we'll see what happens. All right, so our fuel pump kit's come in, and we've got all our new gaskets and membranes that we need. We also got a new needle, lever, and a spring, but I don't usually like to use these parts. I think these kits come like out of China or somewhere, and the quality's not everything I would like for it to be. And if you look at the spring, like here's the original spring and here's the replacement spring. They don't look the same, and the tension of the spring is fairly important to how these run, and so I would never put that spring in as a replacement for that spring. And so when I put this back together, I'm going to use all of the original needle seat, needle, lever, pivot, and spring, and just put in the new gaskets. It's kind of your call on that if you want to use the new stuff. I don't like the looks of it, so I won't use it. And so to put this back together, we're going to start with the fuel pump. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put the spring in this cover, and then we have a fuel pump diaphragm that goes on here and a gasket that goes on here, and then this will go on this side of the carburetor. So we're going to set that down into place and put a couple screws in there. All right, and then on the other side, I think we already cleaned this needle. It looks pretty clean. We'll clean it again right quick just to be sure. But I think we cleaned it before we ordered the kit. Yeah, we got a little bit of dirt off of it, but not much. All right, so we're going to put our spring in. I mean our needle in, sorry. Here's our spring. And then if you look at the lever, you'll see that it's got a button on it, or a protrusion there. That goes over the spring. So that goes on this way. So I'll set that down on top of the spring and then work the lever under the needle. And put all that down in place. Then you can look from the side and make sure that the needle, or that the spring is on the dimple of the lever. All right, and then we're going to put our retainer screw back in here. All right. And then we're going to check the height of this lever. So I have a special gauge here. On this one, I can tell you that the lever should be flush with the two gasket surfaces. So you could use almost any straight edge on this. And that lever is really close, but it could come up just a little bit. So I'm gonna see if I can bend that lever up just a touch. There we go. That's a little better. All right, and then we'll put our gasket on first, and then our diaphragm. And then we'll put our primer block on. All right, we are ready to reinstall this carburetor. Let me reset the camera and we'll get that put on and we'll see if it runs. All right, so let's work on putting this carburetor back on. We've got several hoses to connect. There's this hose here, which goes down to the crankcase and fits on here, that operates the fuel pump. I mean, we have two fuel lines, one intake and one return line. And then this line goes to the back of the air filter. That's pretty dirty. We should probably clean that. Let's see if we can get this on first. It can be a little bit challenging sometimes to get this crankcase hose to go on the carburetor because it's at an angle. So it doesn't really line up right until the carburetor's all the way on, like that. All right, so that's on. The fuel lines are pretty self-explanatory because they're different lengths. So they can really only go one way. All right, and so now I'm going to go clean this air filter just a little bit and then we'll be right back. All right, so with that cleaned up, we're going to connect this hose. Slide that back into place. Yeah, I may have screwed up. Let me see if I can get the throttle cable, the throttle to connect. At this point, it may be too late. I may have to back it back off. Oh, there it goes. Went right on. All right, and so now we're going to connect this throttle cable. All right, that looks good. The carburetor kit that we bought came with a new spark plug, so we're going to go ahead and put the spark plug in, new spark plug in there. Don't know that it really needs it, but came with the kit, so why not, right? The spark plug looks pretty good. You hope to have a nice dry spark plug. It should be somewhat of a tan color. This one's a little bit dark, but not too bad. It is an NGK though, which is a good brand of spark plug. This is some kind of Chinese brand, so we may be better off with the NGK, but we're going to put in this new one anyway. If it doesn't run right, we can stick the old one back in. I think we're far enough that we can try to start this one, see how it runs. So we're going to do a primer test. We'll pump the primer. We can't see fuel coming up in the fuel lines, but we should see the primer bulb fill. Let me make sure it's got gas in it. It does. Let's see what happens. I am not seeing any fuel coming up into the bulb. That is not a good sign. There's a little bit coming up. Sometimes it helps to get the parts a little bit wet. I'm still not seeing quite as much fuel in there as I'd like to see, but let's give it a test and see if it'll start. Alright, so we're going to go full choke. We've pumped the primer as much as it'll pump. And we're going to pull it through and see what happens. And that was a good sign, right? Alright, well, it's sounding pretty good, but I think it needs a little adjustment. I'm going to see what tool we need for this carburetor. I think it's the hexagon. Yeah. It sounds to me like it's idling a little bit too rich. And I had to speed the idle up, which is another sign that it's idling too rich. It'll slow down some if it's idling too rich. So we're going to crank it up and we're going to play with the low speed adjustment first. and see if we can make it idle a little better. Too far. Yeah, just as I suspected, it was idling rich. Hopefully you could hear when I started adjusting the carburetor, I was leaning out the low speed and the idle came up dramatically to the point that I had to actually back the idle speed screw off to get it dialed back down. So I probably went in on the low speed. I probably turned it in probably 2 turns. So that's quite a bit that it was out. But now it seems to be running good. It starts easy, idles good, seems to be making good power. So yeah, I think we can call this one fixed. Quick carburetor overhaul seems to have done the trick, and yeah, like I said, we'll call it fixed. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. I hope this encourages you to get out and do some work on your own. This job wasn't terribly difficult. Few standard tools, probably the most exotic tool. It took like a 7mm or number 7 Torx screwdriver to get the needle out of the carburetor. I don't know why they used an odd screw like that, but I've seen that a few times. Not everybody has a number 7 Torx screwdriver laying around, but that was probably the most exotic tool that we used. Other than that, 8mm socket and number 27 Torx. Excuse me. So yeah, other than that, it wasn't that difficult to do. A few standard hand tools outside of that. So yeah, like I said, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. Check my playlist. There's other videos out there about small engine repair. And yeah, stay tuned. See you on the next repair.